Welcome to another exciting installment of Handuilding with Clay. Let's review. So far, we learned how to make a pinch pot. With a pinch pot, we are able to look at how thick the clay is, how it reacts to being handled, and the drying properties. We are able to attach pieces through score and slip, and we are able to carve into leather hard clay. So with that, we can make a lot. We can make a lot of things. I have a few examples of things that have been made with just a pinch pot and a little creativity. For example, this started out as a pinch pot, and then they carved into it and added these little slabs, if you will, and created a nice piece that has a lot of movement. Another example would be something fairly simple. This is it's a pumpkin, and this basically started out as a pinch pot. Gave a little bit of shape, cut out some eyes. Cute. All right. But I do want to look at some other hand building techniques that could be used in combination with just constructing something purely by hand. Okay. So some other hand building techniques we'll look at today is coil, making coiled vessels. This one will use fresh clay, and we will be working the clay where it is considered wet into wet, basically not using slip and scoring, but because the clay is so fresh, it's able to be blended together. Okay? Another method we'll work on and talk about more than anything is slab. Okay, slab construction does require the leather hard clay to be scored and slip. We'll use slabs for other projects. I do want to talk about it just to kind of make sure you are aware of it. And my favorite is pretty much throwing everything together, combination of everything that we've learned. Okay? The only caveat to that is that it has to be proper thickness, has to have no trapped air, and it probably in some cases should be hollowed out. So with these few techniques, you should be able to come up with just about anything you want. And as you can see, I have that piece of clay, that little piece of clay that I had a long time ago. In a galaxy far, far away. Now, when I first cut some clay out, this is what I put aside, and I put it in the bag, and check it out. Just as I promised, it is still fresh, okay? Now, I am going to pat this out, maybe even kind of pound it onto the mat, and as I do this, I'm compacting the clay, okay, and I'm forming it into basically a little base. Now, without trying to oversimplify the idea of slab construction, I just made a slab. Right? Look at the thickness, about a finger thickness. It's a little thin here, but I can repair that later. That essentially is a slab of clay, just like Gumby started. I'm going to actually use this. Whoop. What am I going to use it for? I'm going to use it for a base. I'm going to use it for a base to make a very small little coil vessel where I'm going to be using coils and blending it into this base and mixing it wet into wet to create a little vessel. Okay. So coil construction is all about using fresh clay. Very important. Let's go ahead and get some out here. All right, got a wire. So as the name implies, we have to make some coils. Now, our ultimate goal is to work from the ground up, to raise and work slowly and methodically, okay? It's a neat project because you can basically pre-make a lot of coils, and then you can assemble it as you go along. And then you can get quite a bit done in a day. So what I'm doing is I'm just grabbing some chunks of clay, and they're about the same size, okay? And they're, you know, they look like little pieces of poop. Don't make it too big, because you'll see why, okay? So, to get a coil started, there's a lot of different ways. I grabbed at it, and so it actually has this, you know, all my fingerprints and whatnot. So, I'm going to actually start by massaging it just a bit, kind of squeezing it, kind of doing this kind of cow udder thing. And I'm basically trying to even it out. Okay? Now the real best way to even it out is actually on the table. Okay? Now here's where the mats sometimes get a little bit irritating, because sometimes the clay wants to pull the mat with it. But if you do it on like a regular surface, like on the countertop, it will stick a little bit more. So I'm going to do it on the mat and on the countertop just to show you the difference. The key to making a great coil is to go slow and steady, right? And as I drag my hand across the coil, I deliver even pressure and I move along the coil and I work slowly, right? This does compact it. If you linger too long on any one section, you run the chance of it rolling over on itself. This is not a race. Oops. It will start to get long. You can use two hands and move. Okay. Now, as I go, you see that there's these little micro cracks. I wouldn't worry too much about them. That's maybe one of the reasons why I don't like using the mat too much, because it actually is taking away the water. But let's do it both ways. How thick do I do it? Any guesses? Any guesses? That's right. You don't want to go too thin. The reason why you don't want to go too thin, I'm going to do this without the mat now just to show you the difference. The reason why you don't want to go too thin is because you will be needing this clay body to work into the next coil. Okay, so let's go ahead and prepare a few coils. I'll show you that. You can do this actually quickly. Once you kind of know what to do, you can go quicker. Now, I take that back. I'm going to be real sloppy. You see what happens there? It gets too thin, too fast, rolls around on itself, and breaks. Okay, so that's why we don't want to go too fast. Let's see if I can resurrect that. If you start getting little folds in it, don't worry too much. Most likely you will be working those out later. Doing coil vessels, working in coils, is nice and it's methodical. And the people who feel that they are not like overly artistic have a lot of success with it. So I do like this process. Okay, I'll take the slab, bam, okay. And I'm going to start with the coil here, right? And I'm going to actually start from the inside here. Now, if I just press the coil on there, I'm going to start with just this because you can see it. If I just put the coil on there, guess what? It's going to come apart. It doesn't even need to dry to come apart. So here's the wet into wet that I promised. You can take a wood tool. You can take the end of a paintbrush. You can take a fork. All right? I'm going to actually show you with a fork. And I like the wood tools. Okay, I like the wood tools. A little water wouldn't hurt. Now, I'm going to go super quick because there's about 1 billion, well, okay, maybe 100. Oh, careful, clay sticks to non-porous surfaces. Okay, after I do one revolution, I can actually go back and kind of cross stitch it. Now you see why, hopefully, that the coils can't be too thin. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and put another series of coils here. I'm not going to try to. This is the ugliest coil vessel I've ever made. But look at the timestamp. It took me, what, 4 minutes. Point is that I am able to connect wet pieces of clay together as long as you stitch them together, blend them together. Now, this on the inside is kind of strong. Okay, if I'm going to be creating something, you know, that's a little more sculptural, maybe a body of an animal or something, then I would actually bother to do the outside, right? But let's just say I don't want to. I'm going to do something kind of nice. I'm going to make a little spiral here. Right, make it nice and tight. Okay. Add a little clay there, a little score and slip. Squeeze it on there, and on the inside, I'm going to combine it. So the concept is the same. I'm in a sense scoring and slipping, and you'll see how this either works or doesn't work depending on, you know, if it falls apart or not. And you can always take a little extra fresh clay, yeah. And as long as you blend it well, and I guess in a sense, yeah, score and slip it, you should be okay. All right. Try not to use too much water. I'm using the flat side of this brush. You can use a wood tool. All right. So inside, all right, and then the outside. I can go back and I could smooth out the micro cracks. And then from here, basically I have this thing that I can work with, this little vessel. And just to show you what the coil method can achieve in a relatively short time, here's a fired piece that was one of the projects from a student, and as you can see, it's an exposed coil, and on the inside, just as I shown, everything was smoothed out. Okay? And so it actually is fairly strong, even though it's quite thin, and it's quite large for a minimal amount of clay. With the coil vessel, if you work too fast and go too far up in a single day, you run the risk of the whole thing just slumping and coming down on itself. Okay, and I mean that's one of the reasons why we do work with clay in small segments, is because you learn about how much weight it can hold and what you can do at what times. There's no real magical formula for it. It is a lot of trial and error and even some failures.